Previously on the Seventh Valkyrie, Meridia's night is interrupted by a tall stranger, one with a gruff voice and an intimate knowledge of the Light Corps and the war. Now face to face with the man she calls the False Wolf, how will this showdown between Corpsman and Corpsman turn out? Well, find out next on the Seventh Valkyrie. It might have been enough to confuse someone going off of the wanted posters, but it wasn't enough to fool Meridia. Before you do what you're about to do, I have a question. Do you enjoy the use of your right quad? The man asked, just as Meridia was starting to move. What? She growled. You're about to reach for one of your knives, he said. I already have one out, and if you go for yours, I'll hit you with mine in the right quad. It won't kill you, but that shit'll fuck you up for a while. Meridia stopped moving, eyes on the False Wolf. He was relaxed, his left arm laid on the backrest of the booth, but his right arm rested below the table, with enough tension that she could believe his threat was real. You got lucky, she said, through gritted teeth. Sorry, what was that? You got lucky, she said, when you beat me. I'm better than that. Remind me, which time I beat you are you talking about? He asked. When I beat you first at command? When I beat you the second time at your house, or when I beat you just now? Just so I can be clear on what we're talking about. Meridia leaned back against the booth. Fine, you've got me at knife point. Why shouldn't I out you right now? He said. Why shouldn't I claim you're a false wolf and a traitor? It wouldn't take much. They know me, they don't know you. Well, you could take some time to listen, because I am asking you nicely, he said. And because you don't want a knife in the leg, I thought that was a pretty good incentive. Look me in the eyes and tell me if I give a shit about a knife in the leg, she said. Come on, Meridia. No one wants me to have to fight my way out of here. People are going to get hurt. No one's going to get hurt if I kill you first, she said. True, but if I'm dead, I can't be useful to you. Look, Meridia, we have the same goals, but if we're going to just sit here and threaten each other, then I have better things to do. Based on all those case files, I thought you might have just as much reason to hate the Machine King as I do, though I... Don't be going around talking about him, she said, leaning in and speaking under her breath. Especially not in public. In the best case, you'll cause a panic. In the worst case, someone's listening and you end up dead. That made something change in the False Wolf. You know him, he said. His voice was lower, but she could feel that she had his attention. Tell me about him. Meridia looked over her shoulder in both directions and then motioned for Val to sit back. He did, settling back down on the other side of the table, his eyes never leaving her. Well, I'm not sure how much you know already. The sentence had been a ruse, and instead she whipped one of her concealed knives directly towards his groin under the table. But rather than a scream of pain, a melodic tone rang out, and there was a clatter beneath the table. They drew a few eyes, but no one caught a glimpse of Meridia's knife as it scattered onto the floor. And instead, the quiet drone of the room's voices continued. The False Wolf's eyes had narrowed, and Meridia's eyes went wide. Immediately after throwing the blade, she'd leapt up to standing, reaching for a pair of hidden blades in her coat. But now the same knife he'd used to block her throwing knife was clutched back in his right hand. Not only had he blocked her blade entirely blind, but now he had moved so quickly she had barely seen it, and she was entirely exposed. Too slow again, the False Wolf said, but there was no humor in his voice. And what, you were aiming for the balls? Not for either leg to cripple me? I'm beginning to think that the new breed of Lightcore are just as dumb as they are arrogant. Meridia's hands twitched towards her coat, and in one smooth movement, the false wolf stood, leaning across the table so that he was only a few inches from her. "What's it going to take to get you to stop trying to kill me?" he asked, with a gentle expression that didn't extend to his eyes or his tone. Still, it might have fooled anyone looking at the confrontation from the other tables. He continued. "What, Meridia? Is your pride so hurt by being beaten that you can't accept an offer for help? Or do you hate me so much for claiming to be your precious Iron Wolf that you're willing to turn away probably the one person in this town who wants the same thing as much as you do?" Meridia gritted her teeth. "You didn't just take his name in vain," she said. "You invaded this town, you impersonated a light officer, and you attacked 2 others. You threatened a high commander, and you broke from rightful imprisonment in an Edoran jail." "That just seemed like a typical disagreement between Light Corps members to me," the false wolf said. "And so what, it's your job as a Light Corps officer to act like some glorified police dog?" "It is my duty to uphold the law and order of Edera," Meridia said, "which includes, no, it is your duty to protect the Ederans. That's what you fucking swore," leaning in so that his forehead was pressed against hers. "Etern prote Lereshka," the false wolf breathed. "We protect the light forever. That means the Edoran people. Do you think protecting them has the slightest thing to do with laws and officers and rules that change with every passing season? Do you even know the history of the Light Corps? Do you know who Varzin was and why we've all got the raptor tattooed on our fucking chests?" Meridia gritted her teeth again, but her brief look away was enough to tell him what he needed to know. "Well, in case they've stopped teaching you, Varzin was an outlaw," he said. "He and his men refused to bend the knee to any Edoran king, and so he was feared and he was hunted. He spent the entirety of his life on the run from those Edoran rules and authorities, and yet when any time war came to Edera, and believe me, the war we had 7 years ago sure as hell wasn't the first one, he and his men would arrive to protect the Edoran people. Oh yeah, each time he fought for them, the people grew to love him more. And each time, the Edoran kings got angrier and angrier that someone had flaunted their authority. Well, eventually they caught him. They lured him in with an attack on their own fucking Edoran people. And even then, until the moment the last arrow filled his chest, he was protecting the light, the people of Edera, no matter what the fucking laws said." "Invading an Edoran city? That's what you think I've done? Fighting you and Chucklefuck McGee? Tell me when that violates my duty to the Edoran people, and I will end my watch with a blade in the chest just like I fucking swore I would." The false wolf put a fist to his chest, where Meridia knew the raptor was inscribed on him. The Light Corps no longer required the tattoo, but Meridia had it in the exact same place. "You, Meridia, or should I call you Protector, are here to protect the people," the false wolf said. "The light of Edera, and if that means you live outside the law, you do it. If that means you stick a middle finger to the Arch-Commander and every single member of the Edoran Council, you do it. And if that means you die because you were fighting for those people, with every other goddamn member of the government lifting the sword over your head, you do it without question." He moved his head back, so they were no longer pressed forehead to forehead. "You worship the wolf. What did he say? I will pray to no god for no god will answer me. I will bow to no king, for no king will bring me justice. I will bend to no law, for no law will deliver me from evil, and I will fear no man, for no man can break my spirit. That wasn't some fancy quote, Meridia, something they hang up on a plaque and bastardize like they have. It was a fucking promise. So I'll ask you, what does that tattoo mean to you? Because if you turned that symbol into a joke, just like they have with the wolf, then you had better take your best shot at me right now, because if you don't, then I will, and unlike you, I don't miss. Meridia looked over the man in front of her, the man who had claimed to be the Iron Wolf, and for a moment she almost let herself believe him. It would have been more than a comfort to know that he had returned, especially now when the road ahead grew more uncertain than ever. A part of her, the part of her that still saw the flames of that burning building, that still saw the thwarps that had threatened her family, and still saw the gleaming, star-steel warrior that had stepped out of a dream to save her, along with the rest of Edera. Yeah, that part of her wanted desperately to believe that the man in front of her was the Iron Wolf. But stature or not, skill or not, light core or not, fierce determination or not, it was a man who sat across from her. And the wolf had been something far more than a man. Meridia settled back, eyes on the false wolf. I have no deep-held love for the raptor, Meridia admitted. Though, I scarcely think I'm alone in that. I knew of Varzin, but his story, if it happened the way you tell it, happened hundreds of years ago, in a world very different from our own. The false wolf crossed his arms, but said nothing. But I have seen a symbol with real power, she said. Something more than a symbol, who actually changed this world and saved real people who are living and breathing today. My mother is one, my father is another, my brothers and sisters and me. You called the wolf a joke, she said. And I'm willing to, just this once, let that go, because of whatever trauma or psychosis convinced you that you were him. I've seen men broken by the war who did things even more erratic, even more dangerous. Fine. But if you dare call him a joke again, I will kill you. I stand here in front of you because of him. I am who I am because of him, and I will fight for that until my dying breath. Do you understand me? A heavy pause hung in the air, and when the false wolf sat back in his chair, he actually had on his face the vestiges of a real smile. Meridia didn't trust that and kept her eyes on him. I understand you perfectly, he said. After a moment, he reached up and scratched his thin beard and broke out into a sly grin, gazing out at the boarded window. You know, now that you mention it, I don't know whatever induced me to claim that I was the Iron Wolf, he said. That man, that entity, whoever it was, well, I might be as tall, and I might have similar armor, but he really must have been something more than human to inspire people like you. I've seen how hard you work, Meridia. How hard you drive yourself and push forward, even when everyone is telling you to stop. It would be foolish to try to compare myself to the wolf that saved you, and for that I apologize. Meridia's eyes had gone wide at his first statement, and progressively expanded with each word. Was she embarrassed? No, never. Though it had been a very, very long time since she felt she'd received a sincere compliment. Meeting her eyes, he spoke again. You want the truth? the false wolf asked. The truth is that I'm a good fighter, but I used to be better. The truth is that I fought in the war for Edera, and I learned how to hunt and kill X's as well as anyone still remaining on this planet. And the truth is that the Machine King killed people close to me, and I'm going to end him for that. Everything else, well, call it the ravings of a battle-mad soldier burned out too soon. But why all the lies? She asked. Why wouldn't you just have told the truth? We could have fixed all of these problems. We could have worked together officially. I could have brought you on as a consultant to work for us, rather than this... whatever we're doing now. Well, we've seen how following the system has worked out for you, the man said quietly. Meridia sat back. Maybe it's healthy that I didn't trust it. Maybe it's not, but we're here now. She reached out for her drink, and he in turn began to finish his beer. For a while they sat in silence. It's well past time that I should be leaving, he said, breaking the momentary pause. Any more discussion and your barkeeper friend will expect us to be heading home together, and we both know you're being watched. She nodded. Light a candle in your back room if you have news for me, he said, and leave me instructions from there. We can begin our work tomorrow night. Can you have a lead for me by then? I've got some for you already, she said. The manifests are being tampered with. Someone's hiding something. I haven't put the picture together, but I could use someone to discreetly investigate those differences. He got a false wolfish grin. I had a feeling I'd be right to trust you, he said. Compile any addresses and information you want me to get, as well as any possible contacts you need me to question. You had better be careful, she said. Anyone hiding something like this will be covering their ass. And the High Commander is already watching me. You let these people see that someone's flipping them up the chain and they're underground in a snap. I'll follow your instructions to the letter, he said. Your will is mine, Protector. With that, he held out a hand, but with a hesitant glance, she shook her head and met his eyes. You still haven't told me why you lied, she said. He nodded and laid his hand down on the table. I'll tell you when I figure it out myself, he said. You have my word for that. He stood up then, walking over to her and motioning for her to get up. What? She asked, reaching back to her knives. Give me a hug, he said. We're convincing them that I'm an old friend, remember? She frowned, and he cocked an eyebrow. It's for show. I know a thing or two about going unnoticed. First rule is to let people see what they want to see. And they want to see that you are hanging out with an old friend. Meridia shook her head, but then begrudgingly stood to hold him in an awkward embrace. After what Meridia thought had been enough time, she tried to leave, but he gripped her a little tightly, and then spoke, as quiet and gentle as he'd been the entire conversation. I'm sure I don't have to tell you, but the war was hell. There were a lot of people who broke, not just me. Maybe, I'm no expert, but maybe telling yourself you were some kind of hero rather than a killer. Maybe that might make it all seem like there was some purpose to it. With that, he squeezed her and breezed off through the bar, disappearing at the back. Meridia was sitting, finishing her crosso when Greta came back. Oh, looked like you had a little fight there, Greta said, swishing a hip at Meridia. Little lover's quarrel? No, just a spat between old friends, Meridia said. He's got a tendency to be a real fucking asshole. Oof, Greta said. And, I don't suppose he tossed you a few coins to cover his beer, did he? Meridia looked over, where the empty beer sat lonely on the table. That he did not, Meridia said. Fucking prick. Want to know what happens next? Join us on Patreon to become a hero of Edera and get early access to episodes along with bonus features, director's commentary, and the full Tab to Archive. You can also find other ways to support us at the links in the description, and we will see you next week.